Dr. Philip Friedman. I'll find out how he likes to be addressed. He is a licensed clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. He has been practicing, I'm sorry, doctor, practicing psychotherapy and healing for 30 years plus in the Philadelphia suburbs. Dr. Freeman is on the adjacent faculty of the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology, a diplomat in energy psychology, as well as executive director of the Foundation for Wellbeing, and I'm really looking forward to it. And Dr. Freeman, are you there?
I am here, Maureen.
Hi. How would you like me to address you? In your name?
Any way you want. Phil, Dr. Friedman, anything that you're comfortable.
Do you have any preferences?
Phil is fine. Or Dr. Friedman, whatever you like.
Well, you don't have any preferences. Can I say Dr. Friedman, PhD? I'll call you. How about if I just call you?
Keep it short.
I mean, really, I am asking with all the most respect that I can, because some people don't like to be called certain things. But, you are a doctor, and you should, be very, I'd be pushing those those degrees all over town. But I'm really happy that you're here, and a warm welcome to our show. And I've been looking forward to the show. And, back when we debuted this radio show, which was May 2010, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to have to say this, you guys. I am one of the only original from the beginning of the show, radio show. But my first show was on forgiveness, as a matter of fact. So it's almost like I'm coming full circle around years later to you.
Okay.
So this is very special to me, because I picked that show for my first show years ago for a good reason, and I'm still trying to struggle with it. So I wanted to ask you, why did the book is called, and I named the show after your book, The Forgiveness Solution. So everybody that's listening, so you'll know why that's called. And he said, okay. So why did you write this book, The Forgiveness Solution, and how did you come to write it?
Well, actually, it goes back, believe it or not, 30 or 40 years before I got into forgiveness. I had some powerful, actually, psychic and spiritual experiences that started me on kind of a search into yoga and meditation, parapsychology, things like that, curling photography, and actually a friend of mine was president of the local Delaware Valley Society of Parapsychology and invited a gentleman named Doug Dean to give a presentation on curling and photography, which I was very interested in and actually doing a little myself. And at the end of the presentation, he says to me, I want to talk about something completely different now. He says, I want to talk about some writings, some channeled writings that came into my possession called A Course in Miracles. And he read these 50 Principles of Miracles that starts off this 1,200-page set of writings called A Course in Miracles, and it just had chills that went through my spine, when I listened to these Principles of Miracles. And it turns out I wasn't looking for forgiveness at the time, but it turns out that the main theme of A Course in Miracles has to do with forgiveness. So I quickly started to apply forgiveness to my own life. There was some family conflicts, work conflicts going on at the time. And then I started applying it to the work with the couples and families that I was seeing regularly back then. And then over the years, I started to integrate it, the forgiveness work. I started to integrate it with the other disciplines that I had learned on cognitive behavior therapy, energy therapy, spiritual healing, etc. And then at some point, I decided that it would be a really good thing to pull it together and to write a very practical, this is like a practical workbook called The Forgiveness Solution, and it integrates many of these different disciplines, but the core theme is that there's one core problem underneath all other problems, and that's unforgiveness, judgments and grievances against ourselves or others, and one core solution, which is forgiveness. That's the short story.
That's a good, I like that. That's a good summation of what I understood. Well, I'm glad you did, because Well, because like I said, this is close to, well, I think it's close to many people's hearts. And being in the work that we do, I'm always talking about forgiveness, but I have issues myself with, were you always a forgiving person? Or did you learn it yourself?
I was not always a forgiving person. Like, most people, I grew up with a certain number of judgments and blame of myself and other people who were doing things that I didn't like, and as I said, it wasn't really until I came across A Course in Miracles that the idea of forgiveness even seriously entered my mind, but it's a very psycho-spiritual book and principle, and then I started applying it. There are 365 lessons in A Course in Miracles, and there's quite a few lessons in my book. So I gradually, like most people, learned to develop some level of mastery on forgiveness over many years. Actually, it was 1977 when I came across A Course in Miracles. I didn't actually start writing this book until, 4 or 5 years ago. So it was a long process,
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Course in Miracles. As a matter of fact, it's from many years ago, and I can understand. Well, I'll go on to the next one. And forgiveness is hot these days. I think that it was hot back in the day, but I do feel that more and more people are learning it's a very important part of our spiritual development. Is where my view is on it anyway. And so, as you know, many people are talking about it, and the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, do I say it right? Tutu?
Yes, Desmond Tutu. So they won some big awards by one of the major philanthropic organizations for the, they're talking about forgiveness and the work that they had done in the field of forgiveness. So, just about everybody, forgiveness applies to people personally, relationally, maritally, family, and of course spiritually. So it covers
and that universally, really, isn't it a universal? I mean, it's
yes, and of course, when I said spiritually, I mean universally, and things happen all the time in our lives and in the world that we call them forgiveness opportunities.
So, what is the core theme of the forgiveness solution that you came up with here?
Well, the core theme is that there's one core problem, unforgiveness, which is also defined as judgments, grievances, and attack thoughts that we have against ourselves or other people or God or groups, and one core solution, which is forgiveness. Forgiveness is letting go of those judgments, grievances, attack thoughts, and all of the emotions of anger, resentment, hurt, bitterness, guilt, frustration, fear, etc., that we experience, and learning how to develop more peace, love, joy, happiness, and harmony in our relationships, let alone a connection with Source or God or whatever you want to call it for yourself.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, with your personal process of when you were writing Forgiveness Solution, were you at the point where you had been able to actually, people always talk about, I forgive, but a lot of times, I know for me, it feels like it hasn't happened really, or I haven't done it just doesn't feel like it, even though I say I forgive.
Well, you're truly forgiven when you're at peace with whatever's happened, or, let's say someone did something that you didn't like and you felt hurt or bitterness or resentment, or you felt guilty about something, when it's like a psychological carpet sweeper. When you're at peace with these people and these situations and yourself, then you're forgiven. Until then, it's still a process that's unfolding.
And we can learn this, like in your book, you do indicate that it shows it's a learning thing, how to forgive. It's a learning. Is that so?
Forgiveness is a learning process, because I distinguish in the book between two general paths, the kind of path of the ego, which doesn't want to forgive, and the path of the higher self or the soul that can help guide you to forgiveness. So it's definitely a process, and it's a learning process, and for some people it takes more time than others, depending on their life experiences and the good teachers or books they have available and how motivated they are.
Right. So what about the three you mentioned in your book? There's three key areas of forgiveness we can learn?
I'm referring to forgiving yourself, forgiving others, and forgiving circumstances that come up in your life. I mean, there are others like forgiving God and ethnic groups, but the three main ones are forgiving yourself, forgiving others, like your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your kids, your in-laws, your boss, your colleagues, all those people, and all of the circumstances that come up sometimes unexpectedly in life.
Well, do you think, can people really forgive, like I was saying earlier, or do they just unconsciously pretend to forgive?
Well, some people pretend to forgive, but if you do the exercises and processes in my book, there's many different tools and techniques that I've pulled together from different traditions in my book in an easily understandable way. If you practice them consistently, then you can learn to forgive and develop more peace and love and joy and happiness in your life and healing and harmony in your relationships. So, for example, I had someone that came to see me a few months ago, and he was screaming at his kids all the time. He was battling with his wife, was threatening to leave. He was hitting the walls, so he wasn't hitting people. He was fighting with his boss and his brother all the time. He was like a wreck. And through working with me with these different tools and techniques, he learned to relate dramatically different with his kids, so that, by changing his attitudes and the way he talked to them, and now they have a harmonious relationship. He's getting along really well with his wife. Now he gets along so well with his boss at work that all the other people at work come to him to kind of be a mediator between them and the boss, and his relationship with his brother that probably started it all from a lot of hurt and pain from feeling disrespected and put down as he grew up, that's been transformed. So, over a period of months, 3, 4, 5 months, he's completely transformed all of that, and he's forgiven himself so that all the guilt he was carrying around, let alone all the anger and hurt and bitterness, is all dissolved and disappeared. Now he's at peace and a very happy person.
So the thing is inner peace. There's something I'm looking at here. Something I pulled off the questions, of course, to ask you, but there's 4 of us on the show here. There's 4 hosts. We have one of those like the View thing, and Brenda, who's an Italian, you say something, do people forgive but never forget? And she's always talking about, us Italians, we may forgive but we never forget. Brenda,
yeah, I'm here.
I'm married to an Italian, so
it's just a kind of thing, and I can't explain it. It's not like, maybe it's a thing of trust or respect. It's not so much that we don't forgive them, for doing what they're doing. It's almost like, that we don't forget it because we're on the alert that they might do it again. See what I mean? That type of thing.
But
I don't know if that's would classify as total forgiveness.
I think that phrase, I forgive but I never forget, I think that's only partial forgiveness. When you're truly forgiven, that sense of vulnerability is gone, that emotional reactivity is gone. You're truly at peace when you're with these people and when you think about these people. And so either you do forget, or the emotional reactivity and the emotional charge that you experience when you're around them or you're thinking about them is gone. So it's
it's only a partial forgiveness then, huh? It's like 90%, and the other 10% still kind of hanging out there.
It's only a partial forgiveness.
Okay, well, I'm guilty then.
Yeah, well, I think I'm a bit with that too.
In technical terms, neuroscience terms, when you haven't forgiven, when there's a lot of resentment, bitterness, hurt, and all that, the limbic system and the amygdala in the brain is very quickly activated, and the prefrontal cortex is dampened down. So when you're truly forgiven, what happens is these emotional centers of the brain, like the amygdala and the limbic system, they're no longer activated when you think about her in the presence of the others, and the prefrontal cortex is the mental centers of the brain. They are stimulated and they're resourceful now. So you're actually changing the wiring in the brain when you've truly forgiven. When you forgive but you haven't forgotten, then there's still emotional charge there in the emotional centers of the brain that hasn't been dissolved.
Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. My daughter's in neuroscience. She'll be graduating UCSD. She's a neuroscience major, and she's always getting on my butt about that. I really need to forgive family members and such, and she says it just doesn't work if you don't do it. Anyway,
it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of motivation and practice.
And who are some of the, well, this is a good one. Who are the people that we need to forgive the most usually?
I think we've been talking about, your parents first, your siblings second, your spouse, your kids, your in-laws, your relatives, your bosses, people you work with, really anybody where there's an emotional charge, which are usually the people that you're closest to,
Well, that makes sense.
Completely, but...
well,
growth opportunities,
But, I'm wondering, I'm just going to go my personal intake, everybody. This is just me. I'm not saying it's for everybody. But, Brenda talks about, forgive and never forget. When some people that you may forgive or feel that you have worked it through to forgive, but there are people that are ongoing throughout your maybe family, and they continually do things that are unforgivable, or they are very challenging. Let's put it that way. Can it make it very difficult to use some of these techniques?
Forgiveness opportunities,
Yeah.
They're in your life to help you to practice forgiveness.
That's true. That's a good way of looking at it. I like that. Okay, I'll go with that one. But so, what are some of the techniques that you can recommend to help us forgive? And are these different than ones who are recommended by other authors out there on forgiveness?
Well, there's about 10 categories of techniques. I'll just briefly mention, and you want to ask me more about one of them, you can, but there are positive affirmations, there's forgiveness-guided imagery, there's like 14 different ones in my book, and a lot of affirmation, there's teaching stories, there's a lot of energy techniques, I call them positive pressure point techniques, there's meditation and mindfulness, there's practicing gratitude and compassion, there's journaling, there's certain spiritual healing exercises, there's cognitive and attitudinal behavior change exercises. There's a lot of different things that are available and in my book and, of course, other places as well. And so some of the most powerful ones are some of the energy techniques, like the emotional freedom technique and the positive pressure point techniques. These help to dissolve a lot of the hurt, anger, bitterness, and guilt. And I have a lot of couples, for example, that come in where one person is having or had an affair, and there's always a lot of feelings of anger, hurt, bitterness, betrayal, resentment, the whole 9 yards there, So there's a lot of forgiveness work that needs to be done if those relationships are going to be healed, But energy techniques, forgiveness-guided imagery techniques are really good. Certain types of mindfulness techniques are good. Journaling is good. Affirmations are good.
Doctor, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the major benefits of forgiving? And does it really increase our happiness? Why not? Peace, love, and joy, and health, and well-being? I know what your answer is going to be.
Well, one of the things I do in my work as a psychotherapist is I'm very big on empirically tracking change. So I give these measures of peace, happiness, love, joy, well-being, forgiveness, gratitude, compassion to my clients on a regular basis. And you see when people have learned to forgive, plus I have several really good forgiveness scales. So as people learn to forgive, all of these qualities, peace, love, joy, happiness, well-being, improve, their relationships improve, and frequently their health improves. Like high blood pressure can go down, or migraines can dissolve, the stomach problems can disappear, tension in the shoulders and back problems can dissolve. There's a lot of research that shows now that many areas of actual physical health improve as you forgive, as well as, of course, your relationships with your spouse, your kids, and other assorted people. So it's really a lot of areas of your life can improve. And if you do it a lot of people connect with a deeper spiritual source, like God, or whatever higher self or divine
person.
or whatever.
Yeah, I call him God. I call him God. You know, Doctor, one of my co-hosts, Bobby, because I told you there's 4 of us, he has, if you don't mind, he wanted to ask something, if that's okay?
Sure.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Bobby.
Hi.
I'm good.
I just wanted you to address your opinion. A lot of people have a rough time forgiving because I think that to them it means that it has to do with a right or wrong situation. In other words, if I forgive this person, that means that they may go out and do this to somebody else, or it's not right what they did, or it isn't fair, and things like that. Can you address, what it is that you believe about forgiveness and the whole right or wrong issue? I think a lot of people get held up on that.
A lot of people ask that question too. Well, in my field, we say, well, you can be right or you can be happy, but you can't have both.
Decide what you want, right or free.
You got to be. You can choose to be right, in which case you'll be right, but you'll also most likely be miserable. Or you could choose to be happy and free. So I'm looking at a diagram right here in my office here, which is 2 paths: the path of unhappiness, unforgiveness, and being right, and darkness, or the path of being happy, being free, being the path of light or the path of darkness, you might say. So. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that you want to let people take advantage of you and abuse you, and you have to set certain kinds of limits in relationships that are healing and beneficial to both parties. So you don't want to be a doormat. You don't have to be a doormat just because you're being forgiving, which is sometimes implied in that question. So one, it's an attitudinal thing, and then it's also a behavioral. Did I answer your question, or is there another?
Absolutely. No. Yep. I just wanted your opinion on it, and absolutely, that's what we've talked about before, and I do like the phrase that I've used myself in workshops. You can be right, or you can be free, and so that's good. Thank you very much, sir.
But now there's another thing that's kind of implied between the lines in the question there, and that is, or maybe in this whole discussion, and that is when you're considering how to forgive, it's always good to turn the whole process over to a higher power of force, or a Holy Spirit, or just some divine inner guidance or something like that, because there is a place within all of us that's wiser and more spiritually advanced that can help us accelerate that forgiveness process and help us do it more rapidly and effectively than if we don't invoke that higher power of force.
Right, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Bobby. That was nice that you brought this up. I appreciate it. Dr. Phil.
Yeah, that's a good
Little Dr. Phil.
I like that, Dr. Phil. The original Dr. Phil, though, is probably even better.
I think so. How is your general approach to forgiveness? Oh, I already asked. Well, no, I didn't ask you this yet. Your general approach to forgiveness different from the approach of many of your colleagues?
That's a good question. So a lot of my colleagues start with the assumption that there are victims and victimizers, and there are perpetrators and abusers and the abused, and that there's sin in the world and evil in the world. Well, none of that exists in my approach. There are errors and mistakes that people make, and every communication is either a call for love or a communication of love. But in my approach, these labels of victim and victimizer and perpetrator and victim, this is all what I call in my approach the ego's conceptualization of life and the ego path. But in the more psycho-spiritual approach that I have, that doesn't exist. Everyone is either coming from fear and making mistakes and errors that are calls for love, and we look at people through different lenses, you might say. So we're not forgiving sins or forgiving evil or forgiving... we're seeing that, people are vulnerable, and people are always calling, consciously or subconsciously, they're calling for help and they're calling for love, even when they've done things that are, let's call them unresourceful, and people sometimes experience as harmful.
So we approach this with love.
Right. Forgiveness brings out, I have a sign right here on my office that says, love flourishes where there's gratitude and forgiveness. So, first of all, that brings in the whole important area of gratitude. Gratitude and forgiveness are like heads and tails on a coin, but the more gratitude and forgiveness you have, the more love flourishes. So, forgiveness and gratitude are going to bring up love in your heart and compassion in your heart, and you can't separate out love from the work on forgiveness, because they go together like, heads and tails.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick commercial from our sponsor, PsychicAccess.com, and we'll be right back with Dr. Phil.
Okay,
I like that.
Sounds good.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at PsychicAccess.com.
And we're back talking to Dr. Phil. I just kind of like that. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, we were talking about why forgive. I know all about why forgive. It is liberating, and I have been trying to get to that place for I don't know how long, ongoing, and it's so toxic not to forgive, for me.
Well, it's toxic for everybody not to forgive.
Yeah, I guess I'm being very honest about myself here.
You're in good company.
So, let's go into this a bit because forgiveness is related to compassion, gratitude. We're just talking about that, contentment. And forgiveness is not to dismiss anything or what anybody did. Forgiveness is for the individual that needs to forgive. Is that correct?
It's partially correct, and I must admit that I often have emphasized it that way because it is a way to relate to people and motivate them to begin the forgiveness process. But forgiveness is just as much a interpersonal or relational process as it is a personal process. In other words, at the highest level, everyone you see out there is like your brother or sister, and at a very high level of forgiveness, they are like your savior, you might say, that they have the capacity to bless you and to be blessed in the process of forgiveness. So as you forgive other people, you are creating, you're eliminating the separateness that exists between you and other people, and you're allowing a process of blessing to take place. So it's a relationship process as well as an individual process.
Oh, I like that, because we're collective. I mean, I'm all for union. I love union, Carl Jung, about that we're all collectively connected, and so what you're saying, it's a collective process. Then is what you're saying, is what I hear you saying.
Well, they say in A Course in Miracles that all minds are joined at a higher level. All minds are already joined. So every thought, every feeling that you have in relationship to another person is automatically connects with the mind of that other person. So when you forgive someone and then you bless someone, you are already connecting with it. Brings about a sense of oneness at the highest level, and so that's why it can be a very spiritual process now. Not everyone starts out seeing it that way, but that is the highest level of forgiveness, to see, basically to see that the other person not at the ego level, which is where you're feeling all that hurt, guilt, resentment, but at a spiritual level where we're all connected. That other person is like the Christ, the Buddha, divine light. So you have to learn to go to a higher level in order to experience that and to see that. But that's the highest level of forgiveness. It's like a ladder. I like to talk in terms of the ladder of forgiveness. Now, we all start at the bottom of the ladder, but as you get to the higher level of the ladder, you can see that your brother, your sister, I'm using the word generically, is the Christ, is the Buddha, is the divine light, is in that sense your savior, and is a great opportunity for personal, relational, and spiritual growth, and is there in your life for that purpose. There's no accident who comes into your life from this perspective, you see.
I agree. I agree with that. You're absolutely right. There's a lesson to be learned with somebody that... Well, Dr. Phil, I'm wondering, how could you tell somebody listening, we have a chat room here too, and other people, and our listeners, how could you, or can you give any insight to the basics for somebody that's not read your book yet and wants to try to get to a point where they're going to forgive a sibling, let's say, for something that goes way back, ongoing? What would be the process or the first thing, advice or insight you could give to that person to begin?
Well, I'll just teach a very little simple energy technique, okay? Now, here's what you do. You take a few fingers on, say, your right hand, and you're going to tap on the side of your left hand. We call it the karate chop point, like where you do a karate. You tap continuously on the side of the hand, and then you say, even though I have this hurt, this disappointment, this resentment, this bitterness, whatever words you're feeling, I accept myself deeply and profoundly, and I am a good, confident, and magnificent person. You repeat that a few times. Even though I have this hurt, anger, bitterness, resentment, guilt, I accept myself deeply and profoundly, and I am a good, competent, and magnificent person. Then you keep tapping and you say, I love myself unconditionally despite my problems, limitations, and challenges, and despite all these feelings I'm having. I love myself unconditionally. And then you keep tapping, and then you say, and I am entitled to miracles. Say that 3 times. I am entitled to miracles. I am definitely entitled to miracles. And a miracle is like a shift in perception and experience that allows love to flow into your life. Now, those are just some initial steps, but you wanted me to help people to start somewhere, so that's one way to do it.
No, I think that's absolutely great. In fact, I appreciate that. Thank you. I do want, somebody has a question, And I think it's Steve.
Thank you, Maureen. I do. Well, it's a fascinating show. Thank you. I wanted to just explain something that I experienced and then ask your view about it. I was in a relationship for 8 years, and I left that relationship very hurt and very angry. And I work in metaphysics, so I do a lot of energy work. And I feel as though I've developed a strong energy, and I learned 4 years after my separation that my partner hadn't worked since we separated. He'd never been able to find a job, and I felt upset about that, and I did a lot of work on forgiveness. And once I'd done that really detailed work on forgiveness, he found a job. And I wondered if energetically my negativity or my anger may have been holding him back. And I found it happened after my second relationship as well, a shorter period of time, but I was angry about the end of the relationship and upset with my partner, and learned that he couldn't find a job either. And when I did the forgiveness work, he did. So my question is, do we hold others back? Does our anger cause blockages for other people?
Excellent question. I would say yes, because, all minds are joined, energetically, all minds are joined. And I found many times when, if I was upset with someone or something and I practiced forgiveness and, and nothing was happening in the relationship or in some aspect, something important, and I forgive. And when I was at peace, then I get at peace. And, a few hours later, I get a call or get an email from the internet, inviting me to get together or something like that. It's like something shifted in the universe or in the relationship, as you're talking about, as soon as you truly forgive and you're at peace. And so, yes, there's an energetic shift that takes place, and this can take place anywhere in the world, in any relationship. In fact, in the Course in Miracles, there's one great lesson that says, when you're healed, you're not healed alone. Many, many people all over the country that you have never even met and never will met are healed along with you. That's the power of forgiveness. So you may have healed other people as well as this person.
Well, wonderful, thank you.
It's a great one, Steve. Bobby has a question. If that's what I'm letting my co-host just go for it. Bobby, go on.
Well, it's not so much a question as to from the place that you teach and help guide people towards forgiveness. For you, what are maybe some of the first couple of things that a person can begin to do when they think that they're even ready to start forgiving? You know what I mean? There has to be that, okay, I think I'm ready now. So what would you recommend, like the first couple of steps for somebody to be in that place?
Well, honestly, of course, I'm biased, of course, but I would have them, read my book and do the exercises. I mean, every client of mine, I literally give them a copy of my book, and I tell them to read, 2 or 3 chapters at a time, do the exercises, and bring them in. Now, having said that, I mean, honestly, that's what I think is most helpful, but that little exercise I just gave is just one of the introductory steps. I teach that to all my clients at the end of the first session. I go into it a little bit more detail, and then there's a series of follow-up techniques, energy techniques, like you tap on the side of your hand and you say, anything is possible. I'm entitled to miracles. Miracles are happening. Miracles come from love and forgiveness. So you tap on the side of your hand, that's an energy point on the side of your hand, and you repeat that phrase. Anything is possible. I'm entitled to miracles. Miracles are happening. Miracles come from love and forgiveness. So I tell people to practice these exercises like 5 or more times a day. I call this the psychological uplifter. And this is a way to get started. Now, in my book, there's a lot of story. That's another thing that's actually really helpful. There's a lot of really uplifting stories that either my clients or stories that I've, other people have told about the forgiveness process. And when you when you read about stories of other people who have done it in challenging situations, it serves as like a model for you, and that helps guide you along the way. So it's good you can just go on the internet and put in forgiveness stories in Google or something or other, and you'll read about a lot of fascinating stories of other people who have done the forgiveness process in areas related to, ones that are challenging for you or me. Now, I have these guided imagery process. I have 14 guided imagery forgiveness exercises that you can, purchase off my website. That's another one. These are excellent forgiveness guided imagery exercises. They really help a lot, too. They're in the book as well.
What about those that you have found that say, well, I've forgiven that? Have you run across people? Well, I definitely have forgiven, let's say, a sister, and you find that by no means have they. And they really feel otherwise.
People
They're convinced.
themselves sometimes, so, but... like that example I told of that gentleman who came in with all this anger towards his kids and his wife, etc. But, you knew that he had truly forgiven because all the people around him started telling him how different he was and how calm he was now and what a different person he was. When you get that kind of feedback, you know that something has truly happened. But if you don't get some kind of positive feedback from others, then you're just, pretending or in denial or deluding yourself.
Or oblivious. Or oblivious to what
right.
you actually have forgiven.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Phil, I was wondering, as far as I do get that forgiveness is related very much so to spiritual transformation, for me anyway, because it's been draining me spiritually when I have not been very forgiving, when I'm unforgiving. And I think that it affects my work, it affects me, it affects me. me. It really does. And that's what is out. Forgiveness is not so much for the other person, although like Steve brought up a good point about how that worked for him, but it's for the individual to move on.
Well, that's another good point. Until you forgive and you can't move on, like you're stuck, It's like you're trapped. As soon as you forgive, you can move on, You can let go of the past, let go of the emotional pain, and move on in your life. Well, and look, in the example he gave, when he forgave, then his partner was able to move on. So not only was, could he move on, but his partner was able to move on.
Yeah, that was pretty enlightening, Steve, by the way. That story is great.
But also it has powerful relationship consequences.
Is there anything that you find is not forgivable?
Personally, no. But,
okay.
I know there are plenty of people who would disagree with that. But, I was just reading this morning. Well, actually, not this afternoon. I was just reading this afternoon about, people who had been part of the whole Aurora, Colorado thing in the movies, and one person who survived it, and he was already forgiving the murderer, and he was telling, why he was willing to forgive, that's a pretty powerful, challenging situation, and same thing in, in Newtown, Connecticut, it's like there are people who are deep into forgiveness who are willing to forgive some of the more, horrendous things, seemingly horrendous things. So I'm of the opinion that, my brother-in-law, he died in a hotel fire where 25 people were killed back in 1980, and they said it was arson. This is my wife's brother, so it took a little while, to say the least, to forgive in that situation, but it is possible, and sometimes, it takes a lot of time in the more difficult situations. It can take months or years, but it can be done.
Right.
But it is an attitude. It is a shift in perception and a shift in attitude. And it does bless a lot of people when you finally come to forgiveness.
Well, that's a good point because you just brought up your personal story there about the person. Like I said, forgiveness is the show is very personal to me. Well, of course, but like I said, the first show I ever did when we debuted this radio show years ago was on forgiveness, and the person that I brought on was a woman who her father killed her mother and married her aunt. And her story was pretty intense. How could you forget? That's just. But she found. Right? But she found that she couldn't be free to live her life until she was able to forgive. And she went through. It was very challenging.
The other one I was reading about today was, a drunk driver who killed 2 people and the mother. At first she was a lot of anger, hurt, bitterness, but over time she came to forgive the person who, killed her daughter, and eventually went to see him in jail and developed a relationship. They were writing to each other, and then went to visit him, and she ended up, pleading with the judge to reduce his sentence from 22 years in life to half of that, which the judge did, and then she came to care a lot about him. So even in the most difficult circumstances, it is possible, to forgive, but, obviously it's very challenging.
Right, but also it's a very challenging need.
It's a very challenging need, right. But the benefits are enormous,
Yes, I agree, because it's liberating.
A lot of people come in with back problems, as I said, migraine problems, heart problems, blood pressure problems. When they've forgiven and all of that emotion is dissolved, then their health problems clear up.
Yeah, and they get to live.
And they get to live longer. They get to live, and they get to live longer, right?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Friedman, we're almost to the end of the interview, and I'd like to know if there's any last or anything you'd like to share, if you're doing any workshops. We do have all your contact information, of course, but is there anything you'd like to, tell us about, in addition to your book? You've written other books, too, I'm pretty sure, yeah. And
on creating well-being, but... 2 things. I encourage people to go to my website, www.forgiveness.com, and also actually since you arranged this, I discovered quite accidentally that the book is now available on audio through audible.com and Amazon, and also through iTunes, where I downloaded it.
Oh, great. I like audio. I like audio.
Like audio.
That's fantastic.
And, I didn't even know it was happening. And my final quote is that more miracles come from forgiveness and gratitude than anything else. More miracles come from forgiveness and gratitude than anything else.
I like that. That's lovely. I like that. And maybe I'll do that as my mantra when I'm working on my forgiveness stuff. I plan to read now it's on audio. I like audio. I plan to hear your book, definitely. And we have all that information too on your guest page. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we have all the information to contact Dr. Friedman at the website www.forgiveness.solution.com, and also you have other. Well, you can say it right now. Your other websites too. You have 2 more, I think, don't you?
Well, the 2 main websites are Philip Friedman, one Alan Philip, and Friedman FRIEDMAN.com, and then the forgiveness one is the forgiveness.solution.com, and the book and the audio tapes and all the good stuff can be looked at or purchased there, plus a lot of quotes and other interesting material.
Yeah, and also I spent a lot of time on the forgiveness.solution.com. There's a great amount of information about your book and everything else. It's really intense. It's really informative, everybody. So I would definitely check that out as well as we have your books listed on your guest page. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us this evening. I appreciate your work and your...
Well, thank you. And I appreciate your inviting me. It was a pleasant surprise, and I was delighted to get it. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, it was a pleasant surprise that you joined us. I really appreciate you joining us.
Well,
I think this is something...
I have a special affinity for spiritual people and psychic people. So when I saw the invitation, I knew I was in good company.
Yeah, you know what? I want to bring up real quick. Transpersonal. You say my sister is a transpersonal psychologist. As a matter of fact, a lot of people. And when I saw that, I go, well, a lot of people, don't use that much anymore, transpersonal, but you have quite a background, definitely, in addition to your spiritual self. But and I really appreciate you writing this book, and now on audio, so I can hear it.
Yeah, now it's on audio, which is great, and surprised me. But I know a lot of psychics and spiritual people and mediums and all those good things, so I always feel in good company when I have the opportunity to interact or talk with people like yourself.
Likes of us, huh? No, I appreciate it. Well, thank you,
And
Dr. Friedman, for joining us.
I understand that term, empath, very well.
Empath. It's totally torment. I can feel.
Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's like torment, as you said.
Well, feeling a lot of stuff of others. But that's why I think forgiveness is such an important thing for me, because I feel so much. Well, we all feel, but I mean, I could go on with that another show. But so, Dr. Friedman, thank you so much, and I wish you well, and I look forward to listening to your book on audio, absolutely, for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman, and I wish you well, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again for help.
Okay, great, wonderful. I enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Hello, my name is Rez Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 60-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers. Get access. Psychic access. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.